Something that's very special about the Verdun battlefield is that it shows that in war, it's not just people who die, but places too. And this in Verdun has created particular forms of commemoration that CRIC has looked at. What this case shows is that the memory, the commemoration of war, is partly a national matter of remembering those who died for the homeland, and in this case villages who died for the homeland. But what's happening in this case is also families and individuals remembering a living village that was obliterated in the war and remembering part of their family history. This is a local story about civilians, people engulfed in what is the first total war of the 20th century, and who want to continue to remember what was destroyed at this terrible battle. The Battle of Verdun was one of the most brutal in the war, in the whole of the Great War and in history, and the uplands to the north of the city were completely devastated. In those uplands there were several villages, 9 of which were completely evacuated at the war. About 3,000 people were evacuated at the beginning of the battle, and they were not allowed to return because it was decided not to reconstruct them after the war, since the land was too devastated and too destroyed to be reclaimed for ordinary living. These 9 villages were completely lost. It was agreed to declare them dead for France. In 1919, the nation recognized and honored what was described as the sacrifice of these villages for France, and the villages were awarded medals and full military honors. And in addition, something quite unprecedented, which is that they were allowed to continue to have a mayor and a municipal commission who would be named by the state periodically. They had special privileges. The villages continued to exist even without inhabitants. The inhabitants of the villages came together immediately after the end of the war and collected money to create war memorials on the site of each village, commemorating villagers who had died fighting. But they also collected money to erect chapels to be erected on the site of the village to commemorate the lost village. What we found with CRIC that is particularly interesting is that the commemorations have continued to this day and have become much more diverse. In the present day, people who identify as descendants of the former villagers have been working on the village site, creating memory trails, for instance. They've been excavating some of the remains of the village. They've signposted where the houses and other landmarks of the village used to be. They've made maps and with genealogical research traced further descendants. And they've collected photographs of former inhabitants, in one case placing them in the landscape of the former village. As we go towards the centenary of the war, it's interesting that many more visitors are interested in these village sites. And we may suggest that it's because all of the visitors today, most visitors today have not experienced such a terrible war. And perhaps to them, these villages bring home the horror and fear of war much more than the formal memorials and even the cemeteries. The thing that interested CRIC about this example is that this is a case where places and civilian, ordinary living spaces have been engulfed and destroyed, obliterated by war. And to understand in the very long term, when the generations of survivors have died, whether or not these places still retain the power to move and to affect people.